What will we cover today? Our focus today is going to be twofold as we look over what it is you need to be aware of before pressing send. So some high-level key concepts, including what is a warm-up program and how it is that we define email deliverability internally according to our roles, before going into what it is you need to keep track of after pressing send. So that includes the metrics that we track for internally, what kind of content sits well with internet service providers. So these guys are ISPs, and as well as what you need to do to ensure that your email lists are in the best possible shape. And sort of finally, we'll take you through the motion of an email pause scenario and what is expected of everyone here when that happens. So yourselves, the customers, myself, the account manager, and Alex, the customer support technician. That is the gist of it. Let's kick off. And I'm sorry to disappoint from the get-go, but a 100% email deliverability rate is simply impossible to achieve and nearly unrealistic because there are a list of things completely out of your control that are sort of constantly working against you. So for instance, very briefly, a user's inbox may be full, a domain is no longer in use, or in very, very strict circumstances, a business domain is policing external content's ability to land in said inbox. And I think everyone always wants to know what they need to do to land in a user's inbox without realizing there are actually a series of things to do or to at least be aware of before actually pressing the send button. So let's dive into what those things are. First and foremost, before we get into the nitty-gritty, what is email deliverability? And more importantly, why does it matter? Put simply, email deliverability is the number of emails that land in a user's inbox. But as I'm sure everyone here knows, getting your emails to land is a lot easier said than done because an email sent is not always an email received. So we used to think that only the IP reputation mattered when it came to email deliverability. For the past few years, it's actually been that the fate of your deliverability has also rested in the hands of, as I mentioned earlier, ISPs. So whereby the Gmails, the Hotmails, the Yahoos of the world, they consistently regulate sending based on how it is that your content is performing vis-a-vis other senders. So basically, regardless of whether you are the most influential political party in your country or a small NGO that's barely off the ground, you will be judged in the same way, especially in those early stages. So we now know that it's actually a combination of both IP reputation and domain reputation, but that's not all. There is also your performance as a sender that has a part to play in all of this. So the success of your email program and your email deliverability program is based on historical performance. So for instance, if you consistently and routinely target disengaged supporters, this stops you from landing in the inboxes of those who do want to hear from you, leading to a poor email reputation and an even weaker inbox placement. And since these ISPs, so these internet service providers, they don't have any data to base themselves off when you're initially starting as a sender on NationBuilder, setting yourself up for success from the start is crucial. And we'll touch on this in more detail when we look at the importance of warming up your domain. But just to close the loop here, the volume and the frequency at which you send is also key. Too many or too few emails constantly targeting different audiences and different list sizes can be seen as spam-like behavior. And Alex will dig into that shortly. And just to finish off, you may be wondering why any of this matters, because while email reputation is difficult to establish, it is far more difficult to recover. So it's key you remain in the ISP's good books for as long as you can. So if we can just look at the nuance in the type of support that an enterprise account manager will provide, as well as a technical support. So both of these teams, they work very closely together on issues related to email deliverability. The clearest distinction between our two teams is that enterprise account managers like myself will help our respective customers work on their long-term deliverability strategies. So this includes the warm-up phase, making sure that you segment the appropriate audiences based on the type of content you're using or call to action that you're making, so on and so forth. And if you're an enterprise nation, so if you have an account manager, I will always be your first and best point of contact regarding any email deliverability and email pause related issues. On the flip side, for all of our standard customers, our customer support team will be your point of contact for anything and everything pertaining to your email deliverability. We've been sure to include the support team's email address here, although I'm sure everyone is well aware of it already. It's also worth noting that members of our support team are those with the technical know-how when it comes to sort of deciphering metrics. So what may have prompted a high bounce or bad rate and the error messages or the error codes that come with those. So while your account manager may be your first point of contact, if you're enterprise, our two teams are in constant dialogue when it comes to the subject of email deliverability and making sure that the right message or the right recommendation is then fed back to our customers.
All righty, so we get into the dreaded email pause, which is something that probably many of you are familiar with. And if you haven't, at some point you will be. What is an email pause and why do we do it? And why does it exist? So email pause is an industry standard tool for any email sending platform. It's a tool and procedure that helps identify practices or technical issues that can potentially cause long-term negative reputation impacts. And so the way it works is that we have internal metrics that our system looks for and detects. And when something triggers that threshold, if we detect an unusual high rate of bad emails, bouncing emails, or spam reports in a particular blast, Nation's email capabilities are temporarily paused. And so once that happens, a notification is sent to our support team and lets us know the Nation has been paused for this particular blast, and these are the metrics that triggered this blast to be paused. Our team receives that notification, and we reach out to the person who's the best point of contact for that Nation after we've had a chance to look at it, see if we can identify any immediate, clear culprits as to things we might want to change, things we want to talk about, or get some more answers to some questions. We'll reach out to the best point of contact. If we don't know who that is, typically we reach out to the person marked as the owner of the Nation. For enterprise nations, we also notify your account manager as well, in case your account manager has any relevant context or any information that they might have that might help us find a solution and get a next plan of action as quick as possible. So one of the major reasons we pause and that any email sending platform pauses is because repeatedly triggering those same blocks or errors is a major red flag to email providers. And in a nutshell, the reason for that is because a email domain, a sending domain that is sending to the same people over and over again, despite the email's not getting to them, looks really, really like spammy or bot-like behavior. So that type of behavior is what email providers look for when they're trying to weed out potential bot or spam accounts. Pausing gives us an opportunity to take a look at the blast, take a look at who you're sending to, see if there's any technical DNS related issues on our end or something like that, assess the cause of the issue and prevent long-term damage to your email reputation, because even sending to those people repeatedly for a couple of days can really screw up your email reputation in a negative way. And one thing I want to emphasize here is pausing is not a punitive measure. It's not a thing that we want to do to punish our nations. It's a way for us to more effectively make sure that you guys have long-term email reputation health. We want you to be able to reach as many people as possible, but we also want to make sure that long-term you're able to grow your nation and continue your outreach without these negative reputation hits that, like Maddie mentioned earlier, it's a lot harder to recover an email reputation once it's already damaged. And so we try to prevent that damage from happening as soon as possible. And so we never have to dig it out in the first place.
All right, a warm-up. What is a warm-up? Or what is warming up your domain? This is essentially the first step in setting yourself up for success when sending email. And that's regardless of the email platform in question. This is not a NationBuilder specific phenomenon. You will need to do this regardless of which provider you are sending email from. Put simply, a warm-up means that you are in the early stages of a relationship with ISPs. So by warming up your domain, you are showing them that you are a legitimate sender and that you're not sending harmful material. In other words, you're not sending spammy content. For it to work, you need to sort of work your way up and build that trust so that ISPs know you are the real deal. And building that trust, it takes time. Say that you suddenly go from sending 0 emails to 100,000 from one day to the next, then most providers will assume that you have not sort of organically grown your list, which is really one of the key prerequisites of an authentic sender, since they have no historical data to help them better understand your sending practices. So it's all about regularly sending to a gradually growing volume of supporters who you know are engaged with your content. That is the backbone of a warm-up. And so this is a fact, even when you've had an email program prior to migrating your data into NationBuilder. Since your sending reputation is based on the combined reputation of your domain and IP addresses, like we just saw earlier, your reputation essentially starts from scratch again as you switch email platforms. Next slide, Alex, thanks. Cool. So to start off with, that's why you'll want to target your most engaged recipients in those early stages in order to get the engagement rates that you were seeing beforehand on your previous email platform. After sort of emailing or reaching out to the most engaged folks, you'll want to pepper in less engaged people with your most active recipients as a way of sort of mixing these folks in with high volume openers. I cannot stress enough how segmenting the right audience is key here. You're not going to want to target people who you know haven't engaged with your content in the 9 months prior to you migrating to NationBuilder. Instead, consider those who have opened an email in the last 3 months or clicked in an email in the last 6 months. Or if you don't have any sort of engagement data, to carry over onto NationBuilder when you are sort of migrating everything in those first couple months. Think about who most recently signed a petition, or who most recently attended an event, or who most recently signed up to your newsletter. And so when targeting those users, you want to make sure that you've got a sort of warm-up program in place so you're able to have all the segments you're looking to target in the one place. You can do that internally, but if you're an enterprise customer, you would typically do that with your account manager. And so if your emails aren't getting opened, once you've sort of launched the warm-up program, if they're being marked as spam or they're bouncing, then please stop the warm-up program. Talk to your account manager if you have one. If not, reach out to the support team and sort of reconsider your email practices. So this means, have you targeted a new segment of folks? What was your ask? Did it differ from previous asks? Did the content or the copy of your emails change at all? Essentially, look for what's being done differently that could have had an impact on your engagement rates from one day to the next. And in general, these are the kind of stats that you want to be looking out for. So open rates above 20%, click rates above 2%, bounce rates below 3%, bad rates below 1%, and then spam rates below 0.01%. And finally, when do you know if your warm-up has been successful? This can typically take a few weeks, but as long as you're sort of consistently hitting a plus 25% average open rate, and you're not getting a dramatic spike in bounce or bad rates, you should be safe to exit warm-up mode. However, that's not to say that you shouldn't continue to segment your audiences accurately and keep an eye on your overall stats. Yes, I can repeat the rates. So open rates above, and I can also put these in the chat afterwards. Open rates above 20%, click rates above 2%, bounce rates, nothing below 3%. Sorry, nothing above 3%. Bad rates below 1%, and then spam rates below 0.0%, 0.01%. All right, after you press send, what are we looking at?
All righty, so what metrics do we track? And if you've taken a look at your broadcaster and you've gone to your email dashboard, you'll see these in your results tab for any blast that you send. These are the three negative metrics that we look for when we're looking at potential email pause, issues of concern, things we want to look at here. Bounces. Bouncing emails are probably the most varied in terms of what causes an email to bounce. They can be very specific sometimes in the error message that's provided from the email provider. And sometimes they are very intentionally opaque. Something that we'll discuss a lot in the next couple slides is that email providers are very intentionally opaque when it comes to what they don't like and what they do like from email senders. And primarily that's to keep people from gaming the system and finding ways around it and their requirements and their expectations. But we do have a couple of things that you'll see pretty frequently. We rely on the email provider for bounces to provide that error feedback. The feedback is usually very specifically vague. It can range from anything from throttling to reputation blocks. However, they usually don't provide more detail. If it gives you an error message, it says this IP was blocked due to a reputation concern. Most of the time, it's not going to provide what caused the reputation concern in the outset. So it's up to our team to work with you to kind of try to interpret, okay, maybe what is the thing that triggered this? What is the thing that triggered the reputation concern? What is the long-term trend that may have triggered the reputation concern and started these bouncing errors? Sometimes the error messages are pretty straightforward, but if they're not, our enterprise account managers and the support team, we try to work together to find the best solution and interpret it the best we can. Oftentimes, the best tool is Google, and I mean that sincerely. If you go into the results tab for your email blast and you say, I don't know what this error message means, or I've never seen this before, what am I doing wrong? What are the things I can change? Just Google that error, because 9 times out of 10, there's another email sender who's ran into this exact error before and has found a way to adjust their program, change something, and you can find more information that way. Bounced address, that's a really particular and specific error message you will see in your bounces in that results tab. And you've probably seen this error before, and if you haven't, you will. And in a nutshell, what that error means is that our sending platform wasn't able to deliver the email, but it can't concretely say why. So it can't categorize it as a bad email, and it can't determine exactly why it bounced. Typically, 9 times out of 10, this error means that the email address is invalid or no longer exists. The email inbox is full, or it's been turned off. Usually, the best next course of action for those errors is to just phase those email addresses out of your program and start sunsetting them. Oftentimes, there's not really a resolution for those. It's just time to pull those out of your lists and get more engaged users. Bad emails. So bad emails are pretty specific. They are most likely invalid emails, and those are the most common cause. It's one of the many reasons we don't advise sending to purchased lists. Purchase lists can really vary in the quality and the veracity of the data they provide, and it's not uncommon for large chunks of purchase lists to have old or invalid data, including invalid email addresses. Lists of dubious quality will often be flagged by our importer tool as well. You may have seen that before if you tried to import a list with a really high number of invalid emails. Our system will warn you and say, we can't import this because there's a ton of invalid emails that we saw, and it's a red flag. I do want to make a reference that it can be a bad email by mistake. Bad emails are used with certain or marked with certain criteria, and it's internal criteria, and it's possible that an email can be marked bad incorrectly. And if you think that, if you know someone personally, you've sent to this person's email address before, and you're like, I know this email exists, I know this is a valid email address, just let us know, because we can take a look at it and possibly manually remove it from our list and get that back into circulation for you. You just need to reach out to the support team, to your enterprise account manager, and let us know. We can take a look at it. We can take a look at a group of emails if you'd like. We just need a little context as to why you think these bad emails are actually valid, and we're happy to work with you and take them there. All right, the third and probably the most important one is spam reports. Spam reports can have the largest negative impact on your email reputation, even in really small quantities. And that's why, if you were listening to the metrics and saw the metrics that Maddie posted earlier, we really strive for 0.01% of your lists to be the spam report target. Ideally, it's 0. And what is a spam report? A spam report is when your recipient manually marks an email as spam. It's not an automated function. It requires the recipient to manually see your email, drag it to the spam folder, or look at it and then subsequently mark it as spam. It's not an automated process that an email service provider will do for them. It requires that manual action to be counted as a spam report. These are extremely, extremely damaging to an email reputation, which is why we put such a heavy emphasis on making sure that everyone in your email list has explicitly opted in to receiving email from your nation, because even a small number of spam reports can have really lasting damage on your ability to effectively reach your supporters. Another thing to take in mind when you're seeing spam reports is if you're seeing high spam reports, even when you're sending to a list of people that you know explicitly opted into your website through an event you held externally, you may want to look at how much time is in between the initial opt-in and when they receive their first blast, because sometimes enough time can pass where people just forget that they signed up, that they expected an email, and so they just reflexively mark it as email or mark it as spam. So the shorter that time frame can be from the initial opt-in to when they're getting their first email, the better. And something to consider always is that it's best to reintroduce your nation to the recipient whenever you're sending their first email. Donation petitions, volunteer requests, they're never a good first touch for prospects or supporters, just because they can be a little off-putting and sometimes be confusing to the recipient. So always start out with an email that's just a brief introduction to the nation, your purpose, what your organization does, and how you guys got a hold of their email address in the first place. All right, email content. Email content is just as important as who you're sending to. It can be really difficult to identify what things and parts of your email certain email providers like and what they don't. And seemingly innocuous things that you would never think would be a concern, can cause your email to get bounced and get negative reputation flags. Like I mentioned earlier, in terms of what they're looking for, email providers are very opaque with what they want you to send, what they like and what they don't like, and the content of your email blast. We do have an idea of some general, really important ones that we know for a fact that all email providers, they don't really like. Attachments and videos, which we don't allow you to attach videos or emails or attachments to your emails. If you've ever wondered, hey, why can I send an attachment to my email blast? That's why, because if a email provider sees an attachment in an email, they're going to block it 9 times out of 10. And so we just don't let you do that at the outset, just to avoid those potential negative reputation hits. Too many hyperlinks, too many image files, too many special characters, an excessively long subject line, embedly links. There is a ton of others, and it's really difficult to identify what is the threshold for too many links, what's too many images. And so often the best way to identify that is to take a look at the blasts that you were sending previously that were successful and compare them to the blast that triggered the pause, and see, hey, is there slightly more links in this email compared to the ones I've sent previously? Did I use a lot of image files in this one? Is there more special characters? Stuff like that. Comparing and contrasting is a good way of trying to figure out what in the content might have triggered that bounce. And our support team and your enterprise account manager will also help try to look at that, see if we can interpret and identify what the issue is. So if you're ever confused, just reach out to us and we can try to help, see if we can point you in the right direction. All right, sending frequency and volume. So another thing that you will see a lot of is that Maddie sort of touched on them with the warming up of your domain, is that email providers, they love consistency. If possible, try to send your emails at a consistent volume and cadence. And part of the way that email providers combat spammers and bots is to track and monitor a sender's consistency. How many people are they sending to and when are they sending them to? How consistent are they? Who are they reaching out to? And much like content, email providers are not very forthcoming with what they prefer and what they like email sending schedules to be when it comes to sending frequency and volume. However, we do have some general guidance that we know all email providers like. They like you to send to similar sizes of lists at similar cadences. If you're sending a newsletter out weekly to a same batch of people, that's great. The longer the span of time that you go between blasts, say you're sending one email out every month, the more susceptible you are going to be to scrutiny with regards to the size of your lists. Ethan asked a question earlier. He said, what if it's several weeks or several months between email blasts? We just don't have anything going on in our nation, and so we've been pausing our email program and we haven't been reaching out to anybody. It can be difficult to sort of identify what's the best starting point. And our general recommendation is always start smaller. If it's been several weeks, several months between a blast, segment and target your lists, send to smaller groups of people, because you're far less likely to trigger any sort of reputation hits or bounces if you're sending to smaller groups of individuals. An extreme example when it comes to volume, if you're sending to 8,000 people in 1 week, and then 2 weeks from now, you're sending to 50,000 people. That's a big spike in volume. And that's why that warm-up campaign is so important, of steadily increasing your volume of who you're sending to, because it tells email providers, hey, this is a legitimate sender. Look at these normal email practices, and they're not just sending out unsolicited bulk email as quickly as possible. And I do want to emphasize that, it sounds like I'm saying you need to send an email, at the same time, the same day, the same week. That's not the case. But good engagement metrics can help balance that out. So if you're having really high open rates and you're really avoiding those bounce rates, those spam reports, and those bad email rates, that can really help counterbalance any sort of inconsistencies in your sending schedule. Many nations run varied email campaigns with lots of different sizes of lists, and they send at different intervals, but they maintain good engagement metrics, which helps counterbalance that. That's why it's really important to watch those engagement metrics. If someone on our team, the support team, typically one of the first things we look for when we see an email pause is, what's the typical rate that this nation is sending? How many people are they sending to usually? Were they sending to 5,000 people 3 weeks ago, and all of a sudden they're sending to 50,000 people? It's a big red flag. In a nutshell, if you're unsure, it's always safest to send to smaller and more targeted lists. The bigger you get, the more likely you're going to trigger any sort of concerns about volume from these email providers. Throttling. Throttling is something you'll see a lot with bounce errors, and it's usually it's a method that is specific to a provider like Outlook or Gmail. And basically it's a way for an email provider to send a warning to a sender that says, you're sending a lot of email to these recipients, and we're starting to find it suspicious. Again, what is the threshold that they're looking for? It's very opaque. It's hard to know. We usually have to be reactive. And so when you start to see those throttles, when you start to see a throttle from your Gmail recipients that says, hey, we're throttling this sending because we're seeing a lot of email coming in from your sender, the best way to handle it is usually to take those email addresses that that have been identified as being throttled, remove them from your email lists for 2 to 3 days, and then phase them back in. Throttles are usually temporary and they usually only last a couple of days. And so once 2 to 3 days have passed, you can phase those emails back in. And if your throttle is no longer there, you can continue your email program as normal. If it's still being throttled, pull them out for another day or two, sit on it again, and then add them back in and retry. That's a little trial and error, but it's the best way to handle a throttle.
All right, let's now focus on how you should be maintaining email lists in your database. I hope that this comes as no surprise to everyone here, but if you want people to open and engage with your content, you need to share material that is relevant to them specifically. So if you consistently target audiences with content that has nothing to do with their interests, they're not going to engage. And worse yet, they may mark you as spam. So the more relevant the content, the more likely they will also open content from you down the line. And so this is where segmenting comes in. Segmenting based on previous engagement. So where they live, what kind of issues they're interested in, how many times they've opened an email in the past 3 months. That is the key to winning your users' hearts and in turn securing positive inbox placement and stronger open rates. So unfortunately, though, there is no one-size-fits-all approach. There cannot be, nor should there ever be, one email that is relevant to your entire database. Yes, there can be one message that is relevant to everyone, but you can then make it specific to them and to how it is they've contributed to your mission, to your party, to your goals up until then. So over time, your email stats dashboard will become a powerful tool in which you're able to sort of draw conclusions as to what works best based on the intended audience. So use that as a guiding principle in the same way that if your open rates suddenly decrease, understand why by looking at whether your recipient list changed, or was it the content, was it the ask, so on and so forth. If we move back, not back, but forward into win-back campaigns. Win-back campaigns or in other words, reconfirmation campaigns are a way of ensuring that you retain, obviously, a clean and healthy emailable database. So this method is essentially just an opportunity to target people who were previously active in your database, but who are now inactive. But for you to sort of, these people, you have to know that they kind of have the potential to be swayed again, essentially. But again, here, there's no one-size-fits-all approach, unfortunately. You should look to engage those on your list based, again, on previous levels of engagement, engagement dates, and origin of engagement. So, for example, if they took an action on a specific page, or if they originated from an import, and you know what the source of that import was originally. And so once you've crafted your audience, what you want to do is identify opportunities that you know will sort of pique their interest. So this could be a survey or a petition in relation to an upcoming campaign, an upcoming event, or it can be as simple as you announcing that you're partnering with a new organization, while ensuring that all of these have very clear calls to action so that they can actually engage with what you are sending them. At the end of a win-back campaign, any emails who have remained unengaged throughout the campaign should be opted out of all future communications or added to your sunsetting list, which brings us nicely into a sunset campaign. And so a sunset campaign, we know that it is hard to part ways with supporters in your database who have done so much, or who have done so much on your behalf to help you get to the place that you are today. But the truth is, you're just simply harming yourself by continuing to engage with those who haven't reciprocated that feeling back to you. And so implementing a sunsetting policy is where you give yourself a strict timeline on how long a recipient can remain inactive in your database. So this will differ from one organization to the next, but typically this can be anywhere from 6 to 12 months. And the point of this is to guarantee that you only have the most engaged recipients as part of your core email list, because again, and we can't stress this enough, you shouldn't be targeting inactive supporters, as you're only hurting yourself and your email reputation in the long term by contacting those who just don't want to hear from you, which may be a hard truth to make sense of, but a necessary evil to ensure stronger inbox placement down the line. And so in an ideal world, your sunsetting policy should be run maybe every quarter, just to ensure that engaged recipients don't, I guess, the fact that I wrote every month, that is a bit strict. If you want to give yourself a bit more breathing room every quarter. And the point of this just being that you just want to ensure unengaged recipients don't damage your reputation and in turn, increase the likelihood of you ending up in the inboxes of users who do want to hear from you. So if we now move into paused territory, what happens if you get paused? And maybe if was the wrong choice of words, because it will most likely happen to every person here on this call. So let's set the scene. Let's imagine that you just sent out an email reminding your supporters of an upcoming silent auction event that you're hosting over the weekend as part of your end of year fundraising efforts. However, since this is a sort of last-ditch effort before the year comes to a close and you're keen to raise as much money as possible for your charity, you pull out all the stops and target a much, much larger audience than usual. So say we target around 75,000 people instead of your typical 25K email batches. Surprise, surprise, not long after you press send, you notice a peak in both your spam and bounce rates, which prompts our system to automatically pause your email sending capabilities. And so, like Alex and I have said here, it is, for lack of a better expression, sort of necessary rite of passage when sending email out of NationBuilder, because this is just a way to sort of force you to reconsider your email practices so that you don't dig yourself into a deeper hole and ruin your email reputation more than you already have. So if we look at what is expected of everyone here. Next slide, Alex. Thanks. All right, what now? Typically, what will happen is that you will see a red prompt at the bottom of your communications tab appear as soon as you've been paused. So as mentioned earlier on, as your account manager, I will be your first point of contact when this happens, for which I get a notification on my end, whereas standard customers will be in communication with our support team. They are equally notified on their end as soon as this happens. So once a pause has been triggered, the first thing that I'll do as an account manager is identify which blast triggered the pause. From there, I'll sort of be able to spot whether the culprit is the high bounce or spam rate, or perhaps both actually, which our support team typically confirm. And so as a customer, you will sort of most likely receive the following questions or a version of these from either your account manager or the support team if you are a standard customer. So typically these are, what was the origin of this recipient list? Had these recipients previously opted into your emails? And if so, how did they opt in? And what was the purpose of this list? Really, during this process, be as truthful and specific as possible when answering these questions so that we can sort of quicken the process of getting you guys unpaused. Before I go into what an EAM will do next, I'll let Alex loop in on the customer support front.
So typically what the customer support team does is we will take a look at the blast itself. And we will look at the list. We will look at the people who, when were they imported? When was the last time that they received a blast? We'll try to identify if there's a pattern of who is bouncing, who are triggering these errors, to see if we can establish a pattern on the list of who is triggering those errors. Once we've gotten some information from those initial questions that Maddie mentioned, we try to interpret it, and then we get back to you and we provide the next steps for for you to get back up and running, whether that's a reconfirmation campaign, a opt-in campaign, an opt-out campaign, or something more routine. Hey, just remove these people from your list. We've identified them as problematic, or something like that. But we'll get back to you with a requirement and an ask for you. And once you've done it, you resume your email, and you're back up and running.
Cool. So once sort of the account managers have liaised with the support team and communicated any sort of technical details regarding the high error and spam rate, your most blast, and after you've been unpaused, myself as an account manager, what I'll want to do is discuss and review your sending practices. So this means clearly identifying why it is that you increased your typical recipient list size when, for instance, in this particular scenario, ISPs aren't used to seeing your domain and your IP send to that many people at once. So in this specific scenario, we'd look at three things. Firstly, how you chose to target a much larger recipient list size, comprising folks who hadn't opened an email in the last 9 months, for instance. So we'd look at why that decision was made, and perhaps bring up the topic of sunsetting these folks anyways, because you're only harming yourself and reaching out to people who just don't want much to do with you. Secondly, we'd look at how this would have been a clear opportunity to segment your database a bit more specifically. So instead of sending one single email to all 75,000 people, you could have broken it up a bit more, maybe based on previous donation amounts, maybe based on geographic regions. Again, most recent opens and clicks. There are a bunch of ways in which you're able to segment. Filtering is really the best way in which you'll be able to dig deep into your database and figure out what kind of engagement is available to you in your people section. But finally, and most importantly, we could look at why it is that you chose to increase your typical recipient list size when you make, in the event of you making a donation ask to your community. While these end of year fundraising efforts are real for all of you, targeting folks you don't typically engage with and only showing up in their inbox when you're after donations could have perhaps come across as maybe disingenuous. So again, reviewing the content and examining who it is that you're sending what. And again, making sure that the call to actions are specific to your intended audience. So that's typically the very brief gist of how an email pause scenario would go. That's it. All right, we will open the floor to everyone here. We've got around 10 minutes, so I know that the chat has been buzzing, but if anyone wants to ask questions live, now is your chance.
Hey, this is Tevin Jones from Birmingham, Alabama. I was wondering if a transcript of the chat messages could be shared as well, because there seems to be a lot of good responses going on here.
Oh, you mean of the chat Zoom? Yeah, I can definitely look into that, of course.
Hi, I think I had this question and someone else did too. If you do take a list, I get a list from this organization I belong to for educational distribution. So I get that list and I import that list. So they're not opted in. How do I deal with that?
Generally, our recommendation for shared lists is to do a sort of a reintroduction or a reconfirmation campaign if you're getting them from sister organizations, parent organizations. Even if they're not explicitly opted in, because it's shared from a related organization, we don't expect an explicit opt-in in that case, but it's always good if you can, reach out to the organization that shared their contact info and maybe communicate to those members like, hey, you're going to be getting emails from, this organization. We shared your contact info with your nation. So it's best to sort of reintroduce yourself with a reconfirmation campaign. And as much as you can sort of preempt any confusion on the recipient's behalf by, again, reaching out to that parent organization to kind of work with you and maybe give them a fair heads up, that can help reduce any of those, I don't know where this email came from, marketed spam, those types of behaviors.
Other emails came from going through different colleges and universities and pulling off professors in different departments. So they
I'm sorry, could you rephrase that question? I'm sorry.
Other emails I would be sending would come from emails we culled from the internet, from the universities, different departments, sending them directly to professors. So they would be basically cold emails.
Yeah, and those are going to be more difficult. Cold emails would be, again, that's why we generally speaking, ask that you send to people who are expecting, some sort of outreach.
Like on MailChimp, like for first time, there's an opt-in function, do you have something similar like that? So say, hey,
So what you could do is you could start an opt-in campaign. So an opt-in campaign is by default, they're going to be opted out. But that email you send to them that reintroduces the organization often gives them a time to opt back in to receive email from you.
So that's a function within NationBuilder. It's just I have to do that myself.
Correct. You'll need to construct a opt-in campaign. We do have templates actually in our support articles for opt-out campaigns, opt-in campaigns that are basic examples that you can modify to your needs.
Thank you.
I think there are a couple people who raised their hands.
I have a question. I'm sorry. So do the emails generally have a unsubscribe option? And if they do, how does that show up in metrics? Somebody unsubscribes.
So all of the emails that you communicate externally, by default, they will always have an unsubscribe option at the bottom of at the end of the content that you're sending. And then you're able to see in your communications tab, you have an overview of all of your email stats. So including the bounce, bad, spam that Alex has mentioned at length, but you also have an overview of how many unsubscribes there have been per blast. In the same way that you can have an overview of the unsubscribes for a given broadcaster over a given time period, but that will be in your communications tab.
And does that impact your reputation metrics?
So surprisingly, I always say, and obviously Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that the unsubscribe rates, they're not the type of engagement criteria that you need to be worried about when it comes to your email reputation. You much rather have someone unsubscribe from your content rather than mark you as spam.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, in a nutshell, unsubscribes are obviously, you want to be able to outreach those people, but from an email provider standpoint, that they're reading that as, oh, the sender is giving these recipients an opportunity to not receive email, and they're legitimate and they're communicating clearly to them. So that's a good thing. So yeah, a high rate is obviously not good in terms of outreach and fundraising purposes, but if it's particularly high, it's not a reputation concern.
Thank you.
Hello. This is Caesar. I'm from Houston, Texas. I work with an education nonprofit. And so I had two main questions, if that's okay. The first one was, so I think the biggest issue that we have is that we're landing a lot in the promotions tab specifically of Gmail. And so with a whole bunch of promotions, it always gets buried down there. And the emails that I get from the organization, mine go to promotions as well. And I open every single one of them. And so I think we do have a lot of people in our list that are engaged because we engage with them through other, means, but they're just not seeing the email because it's not going into their primary inbox. Is there anything that we can do in adjusting our content maybe, or our targeting practices to avoid landing in promotions?
That's a difficult situation to address, just because it's in a nutshell, it's just a long-term good engagements goal. So the better your engagement metrics, the more likely those email providers are going to place you in their inbox and not in their promotions folder. That also maybe you may want to ask the recipient if they have some sort of setting, specifically sorting your domain into the promotions folder. But from a deliverability perspective, the more you're seeing an open rate, increase, the higher it is, the more likely a provider is going to, by default, put you in their inbox as opposed to putting them in promotions folder. It's not really a cut and dry answer, but that's just one of those sort of long-term reputation goals that you sort of just need to kind of hope for and work at the outset.
Got it. And so just to follow up on that, so if we have this consistent list and we do actually send specifically just to one list when we send our emails, and it's always, the open rate is always above 20%, but it never goes above 26, I believe. So what would the best case in this situation be to only target the people that open, or segment the list entirely? Or is there a way kind of like start over? Because I know there was a whole warming up the domain, and I'm concerned that this wasn't something that was done when this was started, because this we've had this nation for around 8 years, I believe. And so
Yes. So generally speaking, what we would recommend is trying to find a way to segment out that list by creating a smaller group of lists with a higher percentage of engaged recipients, people who are going to open. And then let's say you have 80% of that list are people are going to open this email, and 20% are unengaged people who aren't blocking you as spam, but they're not opening it. Over time, that should increase ideally. And so the higher your ratio of people who are opening compared to people who are not, the better. So segmenting could definitely help. But to give you an idea of like a target metric, what's considered like really good open rates across the industry is around 35%. That's like stellar. That's like you're at the cream of the crop. That's just excellent. That's like the goal you should be shooting for. 20% is what we would consider like, yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's where you should be. But 35% is that sort of target, like this is the best it can be.
Okay.
Even higher. But that's kind of the general idea there.
Okay. And so I'm so sorry, very last question. So there used to be the open unverified tab in the metrics, and I noticed that that's gone now. Is it just gone because it really wasn't a useful metric to be analyzed? Or will it come back? Because we always had the assumption that open unverified included some people that had opened before. I mean, I know it's a way where email providers kind of like market themselves as open, and so it may not be a true open, but we still sometimes use that internally to kind of like gauge where we were at.
That's a good question, and I cannot give you a firm answer on that. I mean, the reason that metric was originally created was when Apple changed its policy regarding how it reported and tracked opens. In a nutshell, there was a period of time, for those who aren't aware of this change, there was a period where Apple email services basically sort of tricked reporting and email sending platforms by opening an email robotically, essentially. So it would look like a open, but in actuality, the recipient actually never opened their email, which obviously can cause issues with outreach and reporting, which is why we created that separate tab for unverified, where we're seeing them as unverified, but are open, but we can't say for sure that they actually opened it. As Cesar, I'll I'll follow up with you via email if I can. If you want to put your
Okay.
email in chat, and I can look into that for you.
Yes, please. I'll put it in there. Thank you so much.
Hi,
So-
this is, oh, go ahead, sorry.
I was just gonna say, I know we're nearly at time, so we only have time for one more question, so go for it.
Thanks. I'm Peter. I'm with Every Library. I'm in Salt Lake City at the moment. This was great because I'm just learning everything that I just did wrong in our annual appeal. But I'm happy to learn it. Well, I did a lot of segmenting, so I did that right. But in one of our segments, I had a nearly 10% bounce rate, where others are, under 2, under 3, and it was 1,300 bounces in one segment, which seems real high, right? So I don't think we have time to go into why that happened, but what should I do about that? I mean, am I looking at this? Should I just run a list and put them in a filter and just set them all to delete those emails or mark them as don't email them anymore? It's just, I'm concerned. I don't know what is my practical next step here.
Thinking. And I
Oh,
would
sure.
say, because it is a tricky one, especially when you're seeing such a spike in those bounce rates for emails that haven't bounced in the past. What I would typically recommend is based on what the error code is. So based on one of the examples that Alex listed, we typically recommend that you sort of exclude those bounced email addresses for a couple of future blasts and then look to incrementally bring those folks back into your as part of your regular sends.
Okay. So,
Because
yeah.
go ahead.
Oh, well, the screen I'm looking at, a lot of them just say bounced, but some give more detail, like this doesn't work with this MX record or like crazy other errors, but a lot, I'd say like 90% of them just say bounced. So same.
So that goes back to that error message I was talking about earlier in the presentation. When it just says bounced address, typically that just means it's an invalid email, but our system can't determine why.
Okay.
And usually the best way to handle those is to just remove those from your list, start sunsetting them, and pull those out, because 9 times out of 10 they're not going to be turned back on. Those inboxes won't be magically resurrected. So those are easily the hardest to diagnose, because our reporting system and the email provider are just not giving us any information as to why they're not being received. But again, 9 times out of 10, it's just an invalid email, and it's time to just pull that out of your list.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Great. Well, thank you everyone again for joining. I'm sorry we didn't have time to get to all of your questions. As mentioned in the chat, I will be sending round a recording tomorrow, as well as a transcript of the chat. And yeah, that's it from us. I hope that this was as insightful as it's been for us. And yeah, thank you again.
It was a pleasure, everyone. If you have any outstanding questions that we weren't able to get to, just send them into support@help@nationbuilder.com, and our team are happy to take a look at them and see what we can provide you.